there was so much smoke, I thought I was going to set off the fire alarm. Like quickly tamped it out. I'm like, all right, not yet. Calm down.
Yes. They say it's like a 7-generation thing. You heal when I heal, I'm healing 3 generations ahead of me and 3 generations behind me.
Interesting.
And I've even had my dad pop in after I've done some shadow work, and he's popped in and said, "Okay, thanks. Like, just a reminder that we get healed when you get healed." And it's like,
yeah. That was amazing to me. Yeah, I was, because the ancestral healing through connecting with the Celtic roots went really deep and really far back. Like, there was so much shame, Bambi, like, oh.
Hi folks, this is Later Editing Leslie. I just want to pop in here and share a little bit about the history, the colonization history of the Scottish, Welsh, and Irish people. This is not a exhaustive history. This is just stuff that I've learned through my own reconnecting journey. And the reason that I looked into it is because reconnecting to my ancestors and doing ancestral healing brought up so much shame, and I needed to know where the shame was coming from. And the shame was part of our colonization. It was part of our oppression and assimilation into the greater British society. Yeah, so the colonization by England, and by the way, England was colonized as well. Like, they were colonized by the Romans originally, and then various Norman and Saxon tribes over the years. Yeah, it'd be interesting to know who the very first colonizer was. Like, who was the first group that decided, we're better than you, and we're going to take all your shit and make you like us, because the way you are sucks ass. And that's the core of the shame, is there was a determined and specific and directed effort to make Irish, Welsh, and Scottish peoples feel inferior about their own cultural identity and spiritual practices. The Irish were paid by the government to not educate their children in their traditional languages and cultural ways. Christianity, of course, was a huge part of colonization and assimilation. And that's a Roman export. The Irish had hedge schools where they would teach their children secretly in private in hedges and keep a lookout for the authorities to break up and scatter if they were going to be found out. In Scotland, the chief's children, specifically their sons, were sent to England to be raised and educated. So they were assimilated, forced to send them there. So they were assimilated into English practice and English culture early on, and then sent back to Scotland to do the assimilation for them. The Scottish were not allowed to wear their tartans. They weren't allowed to play their bagpipes. They weren't allowed to practice their traditional cultural and spiritual practices. And the church as well there was a powerful colonizing and assimilating tool. There's a deep, deep sense in my own ancestry lineage of an inferiority and a shame around who we are. And there was a relief found in assuming the identity of British, which is what my ancestors did. They became British, and we are not. We are very much not British. We are Celtic, Scottish, Irish, Welsh. And that carried on when they came to Canada. They could be British and then white to cover up the shame that was given to them and taught to them by the oppressing authority, by the dominant culture, that through media, through word of mouth, through interaction, repeated the same message over and over again, that who the Scottish and Irish and Welsh people were was not good enough.
So much shame about the things that I love best about my Celtic culture, that wild, land connected, magical, living in a world of mythical meaning stuff they were ashamed of. They were taught to be ashamed of it. You know? And it's all just coming out and blooming and rooting on Turtle Island.
I think that's why, and same with Ukrainian people as well, but with Irish people, like Indigenous people really connected well with Irish people and Ukrainian people. But I think it's that shared common colonial like history, right?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, my dad is like kind of set me free on those fronts. And sometimes when I'm doing things as a female that I should have learned from my dad, but had to learn myself from Google or whatever, like building things using power tools, that sort of idea. He'll kind of step up and tell me he's proud of me.
It's nice.
Randomly, because I chose to make that connection.
Yeah. I find that generation, I assume your father is the same generation as mine, but they're like generationally, they're all horribly wounded emotionally, like repressed emotionally. And all of them lived these half lives of never being able to fully be who they were in the world. It's awful. Like they were all allowed to express anger. Anger was like the only emotion, and love, but only in private and only to your very intimate, close connections. And I'm talking generally, of course, but it's just massive wounding, massive.
It's like if you tell someone how much you love them, now they have power over you. We can't have that.
I know. Oh my God. Yeah, you can be hurt when you love, but you know what? You can be hurt when you hate too. So what do you choose? What do you want?
Yeah. Yeah. And the interesting thing about my dad's family, my granny has stepped up and talked about my dad's family actually. Just to help me understand things, because I've done a lot of research on like residential school survivors and things like that, wanting to learn more about, the trickle down intergenerational trauma that's in our family. And she's stepped up and said, yeah, but your dad also has that. He didn't go to residential school, but in his family, for one, they were Jehovah's Witnesses, originally Mennonite, but then Jehovah's Witnesses. But aside from even Jehovah's Witnesses, my dad's parents were involved in some really terrible cult stuff. Like I'm talking pointy hoods and stuff.
Awesome.
There was this one time. And my mom always had bad vibes about my dad's family, and she never let me be alone with them except this one time.
What happened that one time?
I was about 4.5, and I went with my grandparents to go camping in Banff. I remember going, but I don't remember coming back. And I didn't I didn't really concern myself with the fact that I didn't remember coming back because I was 4.5, right?
Right.
And then when I was on my healing journey in my 30s, it started in my 30s, I suddenly, and this was after my aunt, my dad's sister, had come forward and said that my grandpa was a pedophile. I didn't make the connection.
Fuck.
I always believed her, but I didn't make the connection.
No, because
everything was repressed, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and so then, but when I was on my healing journey, and the fact that I didn't remember coming back, and my aunt made these claims, I was like,
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Did you, and I don't know. Okay. Did you find that when you made that connection, like weird shit that happened through your life suddenly came together into a puzzle that you understood why? Oh, I understand why I felt that way in that circumstance. Oh, I understand now why that happened now. Like, I was also, one of three, one out of every three, also four. So I don't know what the fuck's up with that age. But yeah, finally coming to accept that that was what happened suddenly turned all of these experiences and thoughts and feelings that I had growing up into a context of understanding. Oh, I get it. I understand why all of that
Right.
felt the way it did, and I reacted the way I did. All of it made sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I had like this fear of authority figures, and I had these inner protector parts. So I had like an I don't know girl. So if ever I was confronted with something that I didn't know how to answer or shouldn't answer, or anyways, it would tap into something and there would just be like, I don't know. And my mind would go blank. It still happens
Wow.
sometimes.
And like, you know what? Amazing. Thank you for the protection. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like literally, thank you
exactly.
for the ability,
Yeah.
like the protective ability to continue on in
Yeah.
your life.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when I thought about like dissociating and how dissociation like helped me survive the aftermath of all that, because there I saw in my memories I saw a lot of things, and it's so easy to think like that's crazy, like people with pointy minds, what
Yeah.
my memories show me that there were also two people that were unalived in those situations. And I'm like, come on, I'm making it up at this point, right? But then I called my aunt. My aunt had
Fuck.
company that night, and she was like, she just took the phone into a back room, and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. Do you have company? I can let you go. And she's like, no, you called me for a reason. She knew.
Yeah. Jesus.
She knew. So I was
And
like, I want to share some stuff with you. I think I'm having memories of stuff that happened with grandpa. And she's like, yep, that tracks, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Her kids were all violated as well. But I just said, like, I'm scared to say things that might trigger you, because I know how that can be. Like, if your mind's not ready to hear something, I don't want to, like, hurt you that way. And she's like, no, you can tell me anything. I am open to hearing everything. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not sure how much I'm ready to share, but so I shared a few things, and I'm like, I have memories, with pointy hoods. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm seeing white garb. And she's like, oh, I see mostly black and red in my memories. And I was like, oh, interesting. And so yeah, I was able to talk with my cousin as well. And we didn't really go into any details, but she said she had a lot of nightmares of my grandpa chasing her down the road, wanting to kill her. So,
oh God.
I'm like, okay, that tracks, right? There was a lot of that sort of stuff. So then when my granny would step in and go, your dad went through something very similar. It's intergenerational trauma. Your whole family on that side is wounded in these areas, and it looks very similar. Like, it's no wonder your dad was an alcoholic his whole life. It's no wonder your dad was a womanizer. It's no wonder, like, my dad, to his credit, I mean, my big wound is just the absence of good things with him mainly. Like, so there's a lot of rejection, abandonment issues that I have, but he didn't do that other stuff. So I feel like that was his way of protecting us on some level, was to not really be there for us. So we were still hurt, but just not
differently. Yeah.
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 So he didn't perpetrate those kinds of things, which I am grateful.
Yeah.
And so it was just neat that my granny made those connections. And when I go to the other side and visit, my dad is not in his white centric house or anything like that. He is sitting around a fire with my Indigenous ancestors.
Because it's better there.
It totally is. It totally is. And in fact, one of my other cousins, which I didn't, she called me, and then like 2 or 3 months later, she died. Like, and this was right before the pandemic, or right during the pandemic. I'm not sure. But after she passed away, I kind of heard through the grapevine that she had actually lived with a really significant drug problem, and then subsequent organ damage and subsequent failure which caused her death. She's like 5 years younger than me. But I was dealing with this one memory that came up. I was doing my shadow work, being faithful to that. Like, we're not going to remain in our sludge when there's, you can actually do something about that. You can talk to the ancestors about it, get some truth, some cleansing. She showed up in the healing part of my meditation with the ancestors on this one particular issue. We were in a sweat, and I looked across the fire, across the grandfather rocks over to, and there she was. She was sitting there. I'm like, what are you doing here? Right? And she just looked at me, and it was like, it was related to the grandpa stuff, right? And it was like, oh, she's here because she knows. And now let me show you. I have a whole table dedicated to my ancestors, but this I got at a thrift store.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so I have my granny, my grandfather, which is her son, my grandmother, who was married to him, and this is my dad, and this is my cousin, who showed up at the sweat. And I'm like, clearly, like, you deserve a spot on the tree now.
Yeah.
And then this is my dog Chance.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Okay.
And
that's
then,
amazing. I love that.
I have more spaces on the other side.
Oh, wow. What's your granny's name, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it's Mary.
Huh.
It's like everybody was named Mary.
It's true. Everyone was named Mary. And John and William. Like,
yeah. So yeah. And so I have I grow sweetgrass also. So I have sweetgrass wrapped around here.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, this was
the
perfect thing for an ancestor altar.
I love that you got it at a thrift store too. Like, it was a find that was just like, here, discover me. I love that.
Love it.
Nice.
But yeah, my ancestor meditations or my Dam Supper meditations, like, they look different every year. Sometimes it's just one night. Sometimes one time I did it like 5 nights in a row.
Wow.
And then each night was different, where sometimes it was like lots of writing, and another time it's like, we need to put that staff together. Because I had collected all the items to put my sacred staff together. And yeah, so then it was almost like Granny was there, like, oh, and put this here, and then, oh, don't forget to add this, and and then I put it all together, because that also came from the Tuffy thing. If that makes sense. When they didn't want to let me have Tuffy, I became 14 or 13 again,
yeah,
which was like when my life got like blown apart. And I was that age again, right? And so then I just could feel myself like shaking my fist in the air. Not again, not this time. I'm nearly 50. Like, how can this be still happening to me?
Right.
And I remember seeing that vision of myself just shaking my fist to the sky, kind of thing. And later, when I had an ancestor meditation about that, they opened my vision up to see the wider picture. And initially the reference was to a scripture where God's army was this small amount of Jewish people, and then they were facing, I don't know, the Philistines or something like that. And they had like this huge army, and they're like, we're never going to be able to do it. And the Lord said to them, oh, don't worry. Those that are with us are more than those who are against us. And then God opened up their vision to see this host of angels behind them. And they were like, wow, like if that's our backup, like we're totally gonna win. And then the story goes on, they win, right? So so that scripture came to mind. But what I saw behind me was a bunch of indigenous ancestors with their staffs, and they were pounding into the ground. As 13-year-old me is like shaking my fist, like not again, you know? And that I'll never forget that. That's just like those that are with me are more than those who are against me. I have a whole host of ancestors that I haven't even really met. And we're like, we're here, like, you know, and so I made a staff to represent that memory.
That's beautiful. That's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how horrible my sniffs are going to be on this audio. So like, oh no, I cried again.
They don't sound bad on my end, so I think they're going to be okay.
I don't know. I can see the little equalizer thing go whoop whenever I'm like, like maybe I should mute myself.
No, it's not overly anything.
Okay, cool. Just natural sniffing.
Natural sniffing.
Natural sniffing. Okay, great.
Yeah. And so I've also been like trying to but just living from a place where I'm in my flow state, where when you're in your flow state, like time goes by and you don't even notice it because it's like you're in your true purpose in that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always know what that is, but I've been trying to do more creative things. I feel like I'm being instructed that like what people call ceremony isn't necessarily like, let's set up these candles or whatever and let's do this certain prayer or this incantation or whatever. It's more ceremony is getting into that flow state where you're not stuck, where you're creative and connected, and it's very, very difficult to be depressed when you're in that state.
It's true.
It gets sort of like whatever makes you depressed is like over there now for a minute while you're doing this, and it feels really good.
Are you familiar with Turtle Lodge in Manitoba? The Turtle Lodge?
I've heard of Turtle Lodge, but I've never been.
Or okay. Dr. Dave Chrishane Jr., he's Elder Dr. Dave. He talks about ceremony all the time and about how ceremony is making things sacred, like ritual. He said to me that ritual is a no, because ritual is ceremony without the connection and feeling. It's just the rote habitual doing of things, but not connecting with spirit or heart. Ceremony has to be connected with spirit and heart. And it's making sacred. Whatever it is that you're doing, like, is making sacred. And this is the second time I've done it. I smudged before I started with you, but this is the second time I should ask to be in ceremony with my guests together, and we can smudge together and give thanks and create sacred space together. It's important.
Yeah, I can go grab some smudge.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Okay, so will I.
I have my jar. Prairie sage, locally sourced.
I grow my own and then wrap it. So, have you been learning any, like Anishinaabemowin, and how do you say Anishinaabin? And by the way, I'm gonna cut out anything that I feel like I'm being stupid or disrespectful or ignorant about something because I don't want to offend anyone at all. But have you been do you learn any of your language, either the Irish, Gaelic, and or Indigenous language?
I haven't. Um, Anishinaabe is like
Thank you,
Anishinaabe.
Anishinaabe.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
Anishinaabe language, and I'm not Anishinaabe. I'm Cree, or
Cree. I'm sorry. Yeah, right.
the original word for that is Nihiao.
Ni hao. Could you say it again for me, please?
Nihiao.
Ni hao. Okay, thank you. Ni hao. Ni hao. And what's and that's the name for the nation or the language or both?
Both.
Both?
I believe so. Yeah. I like following David Blacksmith on TikTok because he's Cree and he does so much ceremony stuff, and he does a lot of art. He's got his own art studio in the garage where he's making rattles and drums and stuff all the time.
Oh,
and
that's amazing.
he loves to teach young people. And I just consider myself a young person in that realm, because I'm so kind of like new to the party. So
100%. Me as well. Absolutely. I'm just a little baby on the path of learning.
And so I just I just intentionally follow creators like that are literal elders. And I think it helps a lot for me to just sort of understand, and it's even just helpful to understand like the humor,
Yeah.
like when people, when different things come up and then it just becomes a big joke in the community. Like do you remember when those two guys were on the lam because they had murdered some people in BC and they ended up in northern Manitoba?
Yes, I vaguely remember that. Yes.
And there was so many news crews up in Gillam. I used to actually live in Gillam when I was a teenager. So it was just pretty funny, but I didn't know the Cree word for the male anatomy back then at all. So I didn't know, right? So I didn't get the joke when all of my Native friends were sharing this to the masses. I'm like, but the news crews were trying to get an interview with this one particular man about this whole thing that was happening. And he was like, I don't want to do interviews with you people. Like, I don't want nothing to do with you. So finally he's like, fine, I'll do an interview. And they're like, okay, your name? And I forget what his last name was, but I'm just going to use one that I know from up there. And he's like, yeah, my name's Tagai Beardy. They're like, oh, okay, how do you spell that? It was on the 6 o'clock news. Tagai Beardy gives an interview, and it's like,
oh my God, that's amazing.
Here's your sign that you don't have enough Indigenous representation at your news facilities.
100%. Perfect. Put your faith in it. That's amazing. I love it. I love it.
Oh my gosh. But I didn't know what Tagai meant. So then my friend from up there, he's like, it means penis. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is hilarious. But of course, I'm the person that's like laughing after everybody's done.
Right.
That's okay. But just like, when they were doing, like, there was another thing that came up in the States where they were like, oh, I think it was percentage of coronavirus in different demographics, maybe. And it's like, oh, this percentage for Caucasian, this percentage for Black, this percentage for Asian. And then it said this percentage for something else. That went viral because then they were making t-shirts like something else. That's me, something else, right? And
just
that's yeah.
Just the lack of awareness of how like dismissive that is, just completely dehumanizing. It's awful.
So dismissive, but also hilarious when you go to your local Indigenous shop and they have a big t-shirt in the window says something else.
Oh gosh, that's
And
amazing.
I remember seeing that on the news, and the next day I went to Tika's Aboriginal Boutique in Winnipeg, and they had the T-shirt up the next day. And I look at the T-shirt, and I look at the woman at the counter. I'm like, that didn't take long. And she just laughed. She was like, "No, we're on it.
It's amazing.
We're gonna
That's
shame you in
amazing.
a really funny, humorous way."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's one thing that I found with Indigenous TikTok is the humor is on point. It is just extra awesome. And
Mhm.
I'm like you. I started TikTok through by following Indigenous creators.
Mhm.
Native Reacts on YouTube was the first creator that I followed on TikTok. They're the reason that I got on TikTok.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think I follow them too. That's where I started as well. But my kids were like, "Mom, you need to get on TikTok." And then when I got on TikTok, I was like, "I can't shut up." They were like, "Mom, too much." They both unfollowed me.
They both unfollowed you. That's amazing. So, would you like to lead me in ceremony, or what would you like to do here? What are you comfortable with? Because
I'm comfortable.
I like lit my sage, and it just there was so much smoke. I thought I was gonna set off the fire alarm. Like quickly tamped it out. I'm like, all right, not yet, not yet. Calm down.
Yes, I can totally do that. And I'll talk my way through it for anybody who ends up watching this so they know what's going on.
Cool.
Okay, so match. I've rolled this up from my jar of prairie sage. Okay, so now I have it in my shell. And so what I do to start with is I smudge myself. So I'm going to smudge my head for good thoughts, smudge my eyes to see what I'm supposed to see. I'm going to smudge my ears so that I can listen, smudge my mouth so that I say good things. I'm going to smudge anything that's come that's behind me, like in my life. I don't want the past to burden me. I'm gonna smudge my heart, and I like to smudge my womb because I feel like it's really important to be a woman,
Oh,
matriarchal.
I thought you
Um,
said room, but and it is a little bit.
it is. It was a couple times. Um, then I like to put the smudge around behind me just because I want it to completely surround me. And then I put it on the floor and I wave my feet over it so that I can walk in a good way. And since we're in a room together, I'm going to send some of my smudge your way
What
and
kind of
anyone
feather
else.
is that?
I believe it's an eagle feather.
I have a
Interesting.
I have a seagull.
That's perfect.
I use what I'm given.
I was using turkey feathers initially, which is a common practice, but I was at a river and I found two of these feathers and I showed them to my friend who's Indigenous and I'm like, I feel like these might be eagle feathers, but I'm not sure. Can you tell me? And she's like, they definitely look like eagle feathers. And I'm like, what should I do with them? And she says, well, they're a gift.
Yeah,
And so treat them like a sacred gift. And
yeah.
perhaps at some point you'll be asked to give them away. You'll just know that you
Mm,
give it away. Otherwise, just give them a place of honor. So that's what I have one attached to my staff, and then
nice.
this one sits on my ancestor table.
I like to always say thank you whenever I burn. Just so that
Thank
thank
you.
you. I've gotten into the habit just very recently of saying thank you in an indigenous language, Gaelic or Irish, and English together. So
Oh, that's really good.
miigwech tapaslat. Thank you.
Mhm.